8:05, I'll be back with our top local stories. 8:21, our monthly segment with the Bartlett Arboretum in Stamford. Rosa Lawrence will join me to talk about their summer concert series. WGCH NewsCenter time coming up on 7:52. Joined on the line, second day in a row at this time, producer John Iannuzzi, and he is with real estate mogul Bob Scinto. They do a podcast together called Let Me Be Your Landlord. And John, Bob, good morning. Welcome. How you guys doing?
Tony, thanks for having us.
Sure. And you know Rosa, right, from back in the day?
I do. Is she in studio?
No, I believe she's calling in, yeah.
I was excited to hear that she'd be on.
Yeah.
Listen, Tony, I just wanted to introduce Bob to the WGCH audience. I'm sure they already know him, but I am so inspired by the 3 episodes we already have down that I wanted to invite everyone to check out the Let Me Be Your Landlord podcast because, as the late, great Pat Cooper used to say, this guy's got a story. And, Bob, are you on the line?
I'm on the line, John.
Good morning. I thought it would be such a great opportunity for you to talk to Greenwich this morning about the podcast and about your story.
Thank you very much. Basically, John, I guess, bugged me for a year to do this, I suppose. I did a podcast for one of my tenants, and he thought it would be a good idea to get my story out. My story is basically, when I graduated high school, I couldn't read. I was on the 4th grade reading level. And I worked for my father as a plumber for 5 years. I made $93.50 a week take-home pay for 5 years. And today, I own 52 office buildings, about 4 million square feet. I've got over 400 tenants and I have 100 people that work for me. So I've learned things that, along the way that I wanted to pass on to people that had problems with learning disabilities. I had dyslexic and everything else. So I thought this, a lot of people always said to me, Bob, why didn't you write a book? I don't want to write a book. I have enough problems. But I thought this would be a good format to just talk about, what I learned and pass it on to as many people as possible. Basically, that was what the whole idea of this podcast is, to try to help other people become successful.
Bob, how did you get from there to here?
You have to listen to the podcast. That's the whole thing behind the podcast. I think when I give lectures, I always tell people, for the next half an hour, if you pay attention, I'm going to teach you how. That's exactly the question I asked, Tony. How did I get from there to here, And, I just go into everything, step by step, what I learned. It started in, rooming houses. I was working in a rooming house, and I was killing myself to do the repairs. And her name is Schultz, Mrs. Schultz. She says, Bob, why don't you buy this rooming house from me? And I said, Mrs. Schultz, I said, I take home $93.50 a week. How am I going to buy this from you? And she says, Bob, the way you work, you don't need money. Okay? And she went to the bank, Mechanics and Farmers, Gene Harkins, and she got me a $25,000 mortgage. And then she gave me $12,500 as a second mortgage, and at the closing, she had to give me $13,500 because I couldn't pay the lawyer. And that's how I got started. And then, I was only 24 years old, and I was collecting about 25 rents every Friday night, 32 rents every Friday night. And that was a workout, when you had to go to someone, that's 3 times older than you and ask for a weekly rent of $37.50. So you learn how to deal with people on every level. And that the whole thing I was trying to do with the podcast is give people the tools. There's basically 3 books I tell everyone to read. I ask a lot of people, why do people do business with you? Why do people do business with you? Everyone has all kinds of answers. I'm honest, I'm trustworthy, I'm knowledgeable. The answer is because they like you. That's why. So the first thing you have to do is learn to be likable. And you can do that simply by reading How to Win Friends and Influence People. 6 things you do for people to like you. Learn them, do them, practice them. Then the other 2 books is, of course, is The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck. And the first 3 words of that book is so terribly important. Life is difficult. Life is a series of problems. And your ability to solve problems is your ability to be successful. And if you have the right tools, you can solve any problem. So those are the kinds of things that we talk about in the podcast.
Okay. We got to wrap up.
Bob's going to save the last book for the people who subscribe. But, Tony, I thought the most telling thing is, I've been in radio for, I don't know, over 2 decades. My mother-in-law has never complimented one thing I've ever done.
She's mother-in-law.
She said to me, this podcast is really good. I said, it almost knocked me off my feet.
Despite you, right, John? Appreciate it, Bob. John, good to talk to you again. Good luck with the podcast. Continued success. Thank you.
Bye-bye, guys.
Okay. All right, that's John Iannuzzi and Bob Scinto with the talk about the podcast. Let Me Be Your Landlord is the podcast. WGCH NewsCenter time is 7:58. Traffic and weather together coming up in 30 seconds.
You can host the best backyard barbecue.